Hello, listeners, and welcome, Alison. Thank you for being here.
Hi.
Hi, Alison. So, just so everyone knows, Alison and I connected through a Slack channel that you created, a community that you created called It's All in the Juggle. So, why don't you tell everyone to begin with just a little bit about you and your background, and even how we ended up connecting there?
Yeah, no problem. Thank you very much. I'm Alison Whitfield. I am a people and culture consultant. I mainly work with startups and small businesses on transforming their people strategy. So, no matter where they are in that journey, whether it's right at the beginning or it's realigning after some business change, I'll go in and look at what the business is aiming to do and try and drive that success through people strategy. But alongside that, I also, as you say, recently set up an online community for working parents. The reason that I launched that was because I had just become a working parent myself. So I've gone back into the workplace after 6 months maternity leave over the past few months, and found that it was a bigger change than I think I ever could have actually prepared myself for. And as I started talking to more and more people about how you do that, how you go about that juggle, as it was, I ended up having a conversation with another working mum on LinkedIn. And we both kind of just really connected. I ended up having lots in common and said, we haven't got this community. There's nothing there for us to go and talk to other people about. It feels a little bit shunned. So why don't we go and create that community ourselves? So we started with a free Slack community, which is growing all the time, and we've got lots of content coming out of that. And just finding the more and more we do it, almost every day we go by, we find another person that comes to us with, oh, this really resonated, or I've been through this exact thing. I didn't know how to do this. I didn't know how to talk about flexible working. What happens if I get made redundant? All of these things. It just showed us there's just a massive audience there for us to try and help, really. And what I really like about it is that Jodie and I, my co-founder, we're going through it right now. So Jodie also has a little boy who's around 10 months old. My little boy's around 8 months old. So we're right in the thick of it. And yeah, talking to people while we're learning as well, it's just a really amazing place to be. So yeah, that's what's going on with my world at the moment and how we got connected.
Yeah. And I also think for anyone listening, if you listen to the first episode with Beth about the power of peer networks, I think that also really applies to the work Alison and Jodie are doing. So it's kind of fun when the podcast ends up having common pulls and threads all together. So let's speak a little bit about how, because obviously this was born off of your own experience, and you deciding to go off on your own. What do you think companies, organizations, founders, HR directors, people can be doing to create an environment that is one of care, that is one where people feel supported?
Yeah, I think it's like a lot of things when we start talking about people's personal lives and people's work lives. We're just not in a world anymore where those are two completely different things. The days of going to the office for 9 o'clock and coming home at 5:30 are just not, they're not in existence anymore. It doesn't work for parents, and it doesn't work generally in society, as we all are now. A lot of the time we're working in our homes as well. So society's just completely shifted. And I think the main thing to try and focus on is really trying to foster that culture of transparency and giving people license to talk about what is going on outside of work and what might be affecting them inside of work, and how do those kind of cross over. I think a lot of the stories that we've picked up on as we've gone through this journey, and we've spoke to people who are still working parents, but their children are now like sort of going into the workplace themselves, so they've been there and they've really done the whole parenting journey through that time at work. And we hear a lot of stories of, oh, I had to say that I wasn't well because my kids were at home sick, or I had to book a holiday to go and, go to sports day, or, whatever it might be. And there's that sort of, you can't really talk about being a parent because it's going to make people think that you're not committed or you don't want to do your job and things like that. I think we have to get away from that, because there's people trying to bring them whole selves to work while also thinking that they've got a 3 o'clock pickup, or whatever it might be. So I think fostering that culture of being able to talk about it, and not allowing people to sort of shun others, because, oh, you're not there, you're not that sort of first in last out person anymore, you're not in the office every single day. It doesn't mean that you're not committed, it doesn't mean that you don't love your job, it doesn't mean that you don't want to do the work. It means you've got two really, really important parts of your life that are constantly in a battle with each other. So I think the first thing and the main thing really is allowing people to talk about it, and be open with their managers and with their colleagues, about what's going on.
Yes, creating safety for conversations. And one of the things everyone on the podcast now knows, I speak to everyone before and have a pre-chat. And one of the things that you mentioned that really stuck with me was, kind of the why behind with the talking. And in fact, I'm not even going to say anymore. Why don't you speak a little bit more about like the importance of the why behind that conversation?
Yeah, I think, again, I think it's true of everything. So we're talking about working parents, right? But it's everything that goes on in our personal lives. We should be able to have that openness with our managers or with our leaders. And the reason we need that is because that is how we build relationships at work, and that is how we have that trust in our leaders, and vice versa. And people who trust in their managers and have a good relationship will repay that with hard work and loyalty. No one's going above and beyond for a boss that makes them feel like rubbish for going to sports day, or for finishing half an hour early to go to school assembly, or whatever it might be. No one's going above and beyond for that person. So the impact for businesses is that, well, there's a few things. You either have people completely leaving the workplace altogether and saying, actually, I can't do this anymore. I'm juggling too many things, and it's better for me to just not work. That's not good for anyone, because businesses are losing talent. It's not great for the economy. It's not great for the next generation, because we're losing skills and talent. I could go on and on and on about why unemployment is not a good thing. Or, there's that thing of people stay in employment, but actually they're just really disengaged. So you're not, as I say, you're not going above and beyond. You're not even maybe working to your full capacity, because you don't really want to, for that company that's not supporting you in return. And having that lack of productivity within a business, again, it's not great. It's not going to drive your organizational success. It's not going to get you to those goals. It's not going to help your reputation as an employer or even as a service provider. And I think now, I've just recently completed a head of people role in a tech company. Customers are very, very interested in what you're doing as a business for your people. I've seen tenders come through with questions about diversity, equality, and inclusion policies, asking about what you do in terms of people and culture. So there's massive ripple effects for businesses of not having those conversations and not allowing that space for people to feel in a trusted environment.
Mm-hmm. And what's so interesting, what I'm hearing is we've been told that these things compete, but actually they collaborate, they directly influence each other. And when we allow that, it's kind of a win-win-win. It's a win for the individual, a win for their personal life, a win for their family, a win for their outside of work situations, and also a win for their work, and therefore a win for the organization, a win for their colleagues, a win for, business development and growth. So it's interesting that the narrative is that these things compete, and the reality is that they absolutely complement.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think if you're feeling fulfilled at work, you're going to go home at the end of the day. And if you have then that ability to switch off, you feel a little bit more complete, like you've done that bit for the day and you're okay with that. I can switch off now and I can go into mum mode or dad mode or whatever it might be, and then I can come back to that tomorrow, and that's okay to have that separation, but feel like it's all your life. It's all one part of who you are. It's not put this in a bucket here and put that in a bucket there and don't let them touch.
Right, like I'm picturing like the American offices with the big separators between.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, in one, you walk into one part and you are the human in your personal life, and you walk into the other part and you are the employee or leader or manager in your work life. And it's like the two shall not meet, which is very stressful, even just for our brains to have to shut down and not be part of ourselves is also stressful and impacts performance.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then one of the things that you and I spoke about was I saw this post on LinkedIn that was essentially asking whether companies should ask their employees if they want to have kids. And I am centering this on the kids conversation, but again, there's lots of examples. And I thought it was just interesting because I think there's a point where the conversation is supportive and useful, and I think there's a point where the conversation is prying and will not and is not creating that trust and that care. Can you speak a little to that?
Yeah, so I think there was a tribunal case recently, wasn't there, where a lady won an unfair dismissal claim because she was offered a role and then was asked about how old her children were, and then suddenly the role was taken away. But in the company's defence, they said, "Oh, we were just, being friendly." And it's like a bit of odd timing there. But I think like it's about authenticity, isn't it? I think you can tell when someone's having a conversation with you and they really care if you've got children, or they're trying to get some kind of information out of you for a negative reason. And I just find it a little bit mad, really, that we have this oh, we need to check whether people are going to have kids because they might go out of the workplace. Like we don't ask that about anything else. We don't say like, oh, are you looking to retire early, or how many holidays do you want to go on a year, or there's
Or
there's
how old
loads
are
of,
your parents?
yeah, there's loads and loads of reasons. We don't ask people if they have any other caring responsibilities, if they have people at home who are adults but need their support. And there's loads and loads of reasons why somebody might end up having time off work, and we don't grill them about it. And I don't think having children should be any different, really. And actually, I think when we really build a relationship with someone and understand a little bit more about their life, it's important for managers to understand that other things are going on outside work, but it should never ever be like oh, well, that has a direct correlation on how well they will do their job or how committed they will be.
Yeah.
Because that is what puts stress on parents, I think, of I've got to please my boss, I've got to please my child, I've got to try and be in the middle of these two things. And yeah, it's just I think I find it a really, really odd thing, but I think it's just an almost like generational societal thing that it's kind of seen as, if you employ a woman of a certain age, at some point she's going to go off for 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think the conversation is so much more open now. So for instance, like I never ever intended to have 12 months off when I had a baby. Even before I was pregnant, I was always of the mind that I don't think I will have 12 months off. And what I did in the end was I had 6 months maternity leave, and my partner is now on shared parental leave, so he's got time off with our son, and that's amazing for him because he's had, I mean, thankfully he works in a very good business who have great policies, and they pay him to be off, so he's got time with our son that he will never be able to have again in the first year of his life, and he's being paid to be off. So I think it doesn't matter. There's almost an assumption there that if we hire a woman or if we hire a person of a parental age, that they will have a year off work. It doesn't work like that now. There's so many more options. So yeah, I think it just shouldn't be an assumption based conversation.
Yes, yes. And I also think there's a difference between like leading the conversation with questions based off of what you want to answer, and providing a forum whereby you say, we welcome conversations if we can support you.
Yeah.
So we're not going to say like, we want this information for us. We're going to say, if you want to know about support, if you want to know about policies, if you want to know what this could look like, we are open to those conversations, but you can come to, like, creating safety basically for people to come to you, instead of saying, we're going to check in with each of you because we want this information. I think that's a huge difference in, and will massively impact the culture, the loyalty, and the long-term relationship between the employee and the employer, essentially.
Yeah, and it's like that sort of reframing a question, isn't it? So what can we do for you to give you the right support in your role is very different to what are you going to ask us for? Like, they're two different conversations. So if you have that conversation as a manager or a leader of what can I do? What does support for you look like right now? And
Yeah.
that might be completely different at interview stage to onboarding stage to 5 years down the line of someone being in employment. And that's why building that relationship and knowing what's going on is so important. And there's so many different things that can impact a person's life, not just having children, that managers and leaders just have to be having those conversations. If you want to build a relationship and you want to keep that talent on your team and have a team that repays you in hard work and loyalty and all of those things, you have to treat them like humans. Like, stop making that work relationship so transactional of just going, we pay you to do a job, so you do a job, and that's the only bond we have. I think it's massively important to just build that relationship.
Yes. Yes. So how can people build authentic relationships? What are some ideas?
I think it probably sounds a little bit obvious here, but like, I think if you want to build an authentic relationship with anyone, you have to be authentic, you have to care. So there's no sort of like go in and have these conversations on a weekly or monthly basis. There's no rule set. You just actually have to care and be interested. And I think that is a skill in itself of a leader and a manager, because often you will be having that conversation and trying to care about what's going on in someone's life that might be completely different to you. They might be a completely different age, gender, background. There's so many different things. And actually, that's what we want in a team, because we want that diversity. So being prepared to understand what's going on in somebody's life and just listening, I think, is a big thing. So what I try and do is, when I'm having conversations with people that I'm coaching or people that I've managed in the past, I will often open a conversation with what does this week feel like? How are we doing this week? And I will let that person talk. And quite often, especially as a manager, you get a little bit of ranting, or you might get a little bit of negative conversation. A big thing for me is that, okay, what do you need from me? What does support look like from me this week, because you're feeling like this? Because sometimes actually people just need to get it out and just need to talk about it, and they don't actually need any more support from you. But unless you ask that question, you'll never start really getting an open answer. And then I think once you've asked those questions and you're starting that conversation, it's just doing what you say you're going to do. So if you say you're going to support someone, if you say you're going to be there for someone, help them kind of see the things that you can do to do that. Signpost flexible working options, signpost benefits that the company might have, things like that. And if you haven't got those in place, work with leaders to try and get them in place. Talk about why your team needs more support in the space of childcare benefits or whatever it might be. And it's just being a little bit of a champion for people. But I think the big thing is you can't fake it. You can't just say, right, on a weekly basis, I'm going to ask my people these things and I'll note it down and then I'll forget about it. You've got to really go into those conversations with the human in mind and have a genuine discussion with someone.
Yes. And what would you say to people that are like, I'm already busy. I've already got young kids. I've just come back off paternity leave. I'm juggling all of these things as well. And now you want me to care for my team of 10. Like, how does that come into play? Like, what are the ideas there?
Yeah, I think management and leadership is always a difficult space to be in, and sometimes you're under an awful lot of pressure to perform and to deliver on something, and that's what comes first. I think going back to what we said earlier about people won't go above and beyond for someone who just hammers them and doesn't give them any flexibility. It's just showing up with some empathy of what that person is going through. And actually, if you're a leader that's sat there thinking, well, I've got young kids and I'm trying to juggle all these things, like you that's exactly it. You're already in that person's shoes, so you might be in a slightly different world to them. They might have different childcare issues, they might have you might have different privileges to them. It's just understanding where somebody is in that journey. So if I'm someone that I know people who have gone back to work full time because their parents are retired and they're like, yeah, we'll have the kids 5 days a week. That's absolutely great. Amazing. If you've got that kind of support, incredible. That's great for you. But other people might not have any of that support, and they may now be looking at putting a child in nursery 5 days a week, which is extortionately expensive, and have the massive worry of financial issues weighing on them when they try and show up to work. So I think it's just thinking about, again, it's just that the human side, what is actually going on in somebody's life, leading with that empathy and being ready to listen, and then taking action to actually help with whatever the situation is.
Yeah. And I think, like, also just to think about, it might be a weekly meeting, it might not be a weekly meeting. I don't think it's like the time you spend. What Alison is really saying here, it's like the why behind the time, the intention is what matters. And I think a lot of managers probably feel, I know a lot of the people that we speak to at Time Hackers like feel like, well, I just have like 1,000 things going on. And it's like, we don't want to add another 100 to that 1,000. That's not going to be beneficial for anyone. But if we can do the things that we are doing with that care, with that intention, with that authenticity, then we will see better results from them, even if it's not going to be you get an hour sit down with your manager every week, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah. And I think the thing is that, it is about its quality a lot of the time, not quantity. So you could have an hour sit down with your manager every single week and get absolutely nothing from it, but you could have an hour sit down with them every 3 months and have a great relationship. So it's about the quality of those conversations. And I think in order to show up for your team in the best way, you have to know them in the first place. So you've got to put the groundwork into getting to know them, because then when you're just on a call like this, or you turn up to a meeting and they don't seem themselves, that's when you're going to notice. But you're never going to notice if someone doesn't feel themselves if you don't really know them in the first place. That's when you can then show up and say, pull them aside, go onto a call separately. Listen, is everything all right? How are things at home? What's going on this week? You don't really seem like yourself. Is there anything I can support with? You're never going to be able to get that information if you don't really know the person. So yeah, I think having that relationship in the first place gives you the opportunity to then pick up with that person. And yeah, you're absolutely right. It doesn't matter necessarily having a schedule of time. The person and the human conversation is the important thing.
Yeah. And what do you think are some differences for companies or founders to be aware of when they've got a HR team or director versus when they don't?
I think this is one of my favorite questions, because obviously I was a standalone HR person. And I've been in companies where there's a massive HR team as well. I think regardless of what your HR and people team looks like, your managers and leaders will be the people that actually make your people strategy a success, and they have to be on board with that. They're the people at the end of the day that are responsible for the teams in your organization. And HR and people, whatever we want to call that department these days, they will be there to support those managers and leaders, and to support the individuals as well. But really, they're the ones that are with them every single day. They're the ones that need to be managing their performance. They're the ones that notice when they show up for work or not, when they approve their holidays, all of those things. you have to have the managers and leaders on board in any kind of people strategy for it to work. So I think regardless of where you are in that journey and how you manage it, having the right people in leadership and management roles is massive, and having the right training for those people is so important. Otherwise, you could bring in the world's most experienced, fantastic, forward-thinking head of people. If you've got a group of managers that don't really want to have relationships with their teams and just want to go, you've ticked these boxes and you've hit these KPIs, off you go, you're not going to build that culture. You're not going to have that transparency, and it will become a very transactional thing with your people. They'll show up to work, you'll pay them a salary, they'll do the work, that's it, they'll go home. And that's fine. You can do that in a business. But that is what every business does. So if you want to come and set yourself apart from other businesses and bring talent in and grow them and be an employer of choice, you've got to do something different to that. And yeah, having the right people in the right management roles is really important.
Yes, absolutely. And any ideas for like a solo HR director like you were, or a small team, to get managers on board?
I think it's, again, having those real conversations. So how is the business investing in those managers and helping them understand that they have that ability to be vulnerable? Being in a management position is really pressured at times, and the higher up the chain you go, the more and more the pressure is on you. Suddenly you go from being responsible for a KPI or a number or whatever it is to accountable, and it's on your head if it's not there. So that's a lot of pressure on people. And I think that, in my experience, the higher and higher you go, the more you feel like, well, I can't switch off. I can't become unavailable for my team because it's all on me and I'm the accountable person. I think what HR can do really well for leaders is allowing them that space to say, no, you've got to be the role model here. You've got to show other people what's acceptable. And if you're the one that's sending emails at 9 o'clock at night, logging on at the weekends, never switching off, never going on holiday, people are sort of going to see that and think, oh God, that's what's going to be expected of me, and I'm not really ready to do that. So I think where you can show up in a HR role or in a senior leadership role is to help those leaders and managers be vulnerable and have that platform for them to go, come to us, have a discussion at any point in time. I set something up recently where I brought all of the management team together on a weekly basis and just said, what are you doing this week and what support do you need from each other? And everyone has that conversation on a Monday morning and just gets it all out in the open. And I think having that space for openness and transparency is massive. And then the more and more people feel supported to do that, they'll help their teams do that. And it's just a waterfall then right down the org chart, or however you want to look at your structure. It just spreads, and that's really impactful.
Absolutely. So what I'm hearing is the common threads through it are like authenticity, genuine care, providing opportunities for conversation. And I think another big thing that we pulled together today is this idea of collaboration over competition with our own areas of our lives. Is there anything else you want people to know, or that you thought about, or that I've not asked you about, that you wanted to share on the podcast today?
I think, it's thinking about working parents is what I look at, and that's the space that I'm in right now. But actually, I think that thread goes for so many other areas of people's lives. There's a lot of people in the workplace that aren't working parents and will never be working parents through choice or otherwise. And I would not want them to listen to this and think, well, why is it all about working parents? What about my responsibilities? I think for managers and leaders, it's using what we've talked about today for working parents, but actually just spreading that across your entire team. What is going on in everybody's lives? There's an awful lot of change in the world right now. So You know, I think even 4 years on from the breakout of COVID, we're all still kind of recovering and changing and things like that. So just being human with your team, working with them to build those relationships. It doesn't matter what is going on in their lives, they will have something. So I think that's what I'd want people to take away of yes, we're talking about working parents, and that's where I can talk to people about things right now, but it's so repeatable across everything, that every person on your team.
Yeah, it's a huge thing. So in our work, we work with also people that are neurodiverse or have chronic illness, or caring for parents or remote teams, all of these different considerations. So I do think it's how, have you heard of the elevator example? I think I spoke about it on a previous podcast. Where it's like, obviously the creation of the elevator, the existence of the elevator in a building is to help people that cannot take the stairs go to different floors, but everyone uses the elevator, everyone benefits from the elevator. And I think when we start to see again that collaboration and that, like, how is this a win for everyone versus, you know, we're gonna have sorry, a few people win, and which almost creates a mindset of like, if there's winners, there's losers. So how do we all win? I think is a really powerful question for anyone thinking about, you know, how can we create a workplace that's inclusive, that retains our best people, and that supports them to be more productive and effective and achieve what they want to in their work week.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that whole thing. Is just because we give someone more support on this day doesn't mean that you get less support. It's how we work together to make sure everyone feels that way. And actually, what we were talking about before of driving that hard work and loyalty, I know that if someone does me a favor and helps me out and understands that I'm going through something difficult, I'm going to repay that favor. I'm going to look at them and go, well, I know you're having a bad day, I'm going to help you out. You're not going to do that for someone who makes you feel ashamed for going and having a personal life. So it's just having those relationships, whether it's between colleagues or manager employee relationship or leaders, just treating people like humans and understanding that we don't have all of these separate personas that we can pull out and put back in. We are one whole person, and we have to bring that person to a lot of different spaces at once.
Yes. Although I would say, I do encourage people, even if someone hasn't treated you how you would like to be treated, that you might be surprised if you do lead in how you would, like, what becomes available, because I've got experience in that too.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming and sharing, Alison. I think this is a really relevant topic and becoming more and more relevant in the workplace as we're growing teams. And for anyone listening, if you want to connect with Alison, her LinkedIn will be in the show notes, as will my LinkedIn, as will a link if you want to submit or recommend someone to come on the podcast. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your expertise, Alison.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been lovely.